Okay, thank you, Ms. Sandra, for the insight on the implementation in Citic Prudential Life Insurance in China. Agree that this is not only the change in accounting and reporting, but it will also affect the business as a whole, like what Sandra and Nit already mentioned in their presentation. So we will continue with the panel discussion. So basically, there are some points that I already took notes on them. And maybe the first question I would like to ask to Ms. Zsuzsanna, because you did the presentation based on the perspective of the entities in the UK. Maybe you can share how the perception of the UK insurance entities towards this new accounting regime.
Wow, thank you. It's quite interesting because, of course, listeners will know that IFRS 17 has been in the works since 1997. So it has been a long, long time coming. And I think partly, part of the reason why it was taking so long was because the insurance industry itself is very complicated. So finding accounting solutions for complicated and very widely differing business has taken a long time. So I think there was a lot of feedback and negotiation between insurers and the ISB. However, when the standard was finally issued in 2017, the insurance companies have been starting working together to find some sort of consistent interpretation for the requirements. To this extent, our insurance committee within ICAEW that has the largest insurers represented, as well as the accounting firms, we have been having very detailed discussions on the implications, and we are also running a separate discussion group. So this helped us all to have a consistent feedback to the exposure draft that detailed all the proposed amendments to the IFRS 17 standard. And this is what we did. So once the final standard is issued at the end of this month, we restart this work and work together with insurers as well as the consulting firms.
Okay, thank you. So, based on your observation of the insurance entities in UK, because they have started since a long time ago, and how far they have prepared for the implementation of this IFRS 17?
Well, I think the level of preparedness is very variable. The largest firms are getting on with it. They have started a long time ago. They're looking at detailed issues and working on their systems. I think the difficulties lie in software vendors not being ready, and there is really not that much choice. But I think while there have been various delays around the amendments, that was only expected. So once we have the final standard, then we have a clear path where insurers can speed up their implementation efforts.
Okay. Then I will move to Mr. Nick and Ms. Sandra. You already explained the implementation journey of IFRS 17 in your entities, and then we see that this is not only the accounting standard change, but this is basically a business transformation. So basically, I would like to know how do you see the benefits provided by applying IFRS 17 to your company? Maybe Mr. Nick, can you share first?
Okay, that's a very good question. Thank you. I think for me as a CFO, actually, the big advantage is in terms of finance transformation. around improving processes within finance. Often, as we all know in practice, there are constraints on investments, particularly in IT. Often sales-related activities will often get the first place in the queue for scarce transformation resources. IFRS 17 is essential and mandatory. It allows us to revisit and review the processes and systems that we have in place within finance and actuarial. This allows us to have better information, faster information, more detailed information. It allows us to remove manual processes. I'm looking forward to having more accurate, hopefully faster data, and with less risk, because there's less rekeying or re-entry or manual passing of journals. I see that as a big benefit for me as a CFO.
Okay, and Ms. Sandra, can you share your thought about the benefits provided by applying the IFRS 17? Because initially I heard that you mentioned that it will affect the income of the insurance entities.
Yeah, it will harm. You will very likely to harm or damage the P&L result. But in terms of comparability and transform to fair value, I think it gives much clarification and clearance to the market. So so the insurance industry become more comparable to the general industry or other industry. Yes, I think that's the main benefit.
Okay, so you emphasize the comparability with other insurance entities and also the other industry. Okay, yes. So basically, Miss Zsuzsanna also share about the one of the proposed amendment is to defer the IFRS 17 effective date to 1st January 2023. Mm-hmm. So based on the current progress that you have, Mr. Nick and Miss Sandra, do you think there is enough time until 1st January 2023 to be able to fully comply with IFRS 17?
Do you want to go first, Sandra?
Yes. Okay, I'll go first. I think it's very, very challenging. Basically, everyone within finance has their own day-to-day job. But right now, we have basically 1 day out of a week almost to stay on training. So everyone is preparing themselves on their own working extra hour at their own spare time, and to make up those training hours. And those training are mostly conducted by industry consultant, so mostly Big Four. And in terms of time frame, I think we are aiming to be able to provide a comparable result by the end of this year. So just to understand the gap analysis of where we are, and whether or not how we want to change those models to present a more transparent result and a more reliable result. Yes.
Okay, so from Prudential Indonesia side, we were obviously very happy with the 1 year deferral, because it gives us more time to plan, to implement, and to do more testing before we implement. As one of the largest insurance companies within Prudential Group, it's absolutely imperative that we're ready for the 1st of January 2023. We're planning to be ready. We're planning to do dry runs, in fact, before that date, so we're fully tested and practiced before we go live. But I would emphasize, we've been working on this in Indonesia for several years. The group's been thinking about it for a long time. Anyone who's just starting to think about IFRS 17 implementation now faces a very tight timeline.
Okay, thank you. So basically, based on your experiences in implementing the IFRS 17, I believe that a lot of participants also coming from the local insurance companies in Indonesia. So do you have any tips or suggestion on how the insurance entities can successfully implementing this new IFRS 17? Any suggestion from Nick and Sandra?
So actually, if I could just pick up on one of Sandra's points. So she was saying that her finance team are having to do their daily job at the same time as work on the project. One of the key things that we've found to be very successful has actually been to set up a separate team. And it's really only in the last, 9 months or so since we set up a separate team, and we've worked very hard to release it from their day-to-day responsibilities, that we've been able to move at the speed that we would like and that our regional head office in Hong Kong would like. I mean, the other big advantage that we have as a large group is that we can leverage a high-level solution, advice and input from our regional office. That's not always available to local companies in Indonesia. If they are parts of groups, obviously reach out. If not, they may need to seek expertise from third parties. And we've certainly engaged with one of the big 4 firms to provide advice as well. It's a big project.
Yes, I agree with Nick, and it is definitely need top-down and also resource allocation from senior management level, as well as leverage resources. We also luckily enough managed to leverage some resources from the regional office of Prudential in Hong Kong, and as well as industry expertise and recruiting one senior member on the actuarial team, as well as one senior member on the accounting team to form a separate team to lead the entire finance and actuarial team to play along and study along on our making changes on our system, as well as gap analysis. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's a very fruitful and insightful suggestion to local insurance companies participant here. So basically, we agree that this is a new standard and this is a very complex standard. And then I would like to ask, let's say if you have one golden ticket to change one part in IFRS 17, which part would you like to change, Nick and Sandra? And why would you want to change that part?
So if I could change one thing, it would probably always come back to the timeline and the flexibility around the timeline. Some of that is around the IFRS 17 timeline itself. I mean, the more flexible it can be, the more efficient we can be. As I say, it's a big project. It requires a lot of cost, expense and time. And if we have more time, we can plan those more efficiently. But also, I think, importantly, flexibility around time from the local stakeholders. So if we're thinking about the implementation of the local standard, that regulatory reporting or that tax reporting, both, let's have enough time to do it, but also flexibility to minimize that period of parallel running. So it might be helpful, given the different sizes of companies in Indonesia, if some of the larger companies could move to IFRS 17 locally earlier, whereas some of the smaller companies who are finding it harder maybe to get some of that limited resource up front, if they could have a little bit longer, maybe helpful not to hold everyone to the same deadline, but to give them flexibility as to when they'll switch.
Yes, I totally agree with Nick on that. Also, I think from where we are within China, I believe our tax bureau, they don't really understand what IFRS 17 means to the insurance industry, as well as how to making changes the local regulatory tax charges, and that make things more challenging from on the day-to-day or market player basis, because we understand the P&L how it would become, but if this does it really mean that our corporate tax and deferred tax, etc., will be play along, and what it means to VAT, etc. That is still a big question mark. So yeah, I think the time it is one golden ticket, or time of flexibility, and also I think not just accountant or actuaries worry about IFRS 17, but having this impact, those message passed to the regulatory as well as more of the local regulatory supervision board is also very important. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So basically, I'm also taking a look at some of the questions raised by the participant here. There are some good questions. So there is one question asking how does the impact of the COVID-19 to the preparation of IFRS 17 and the global insurance industry? Maybe I would like, this question is addressed to Zsuzsanna.
Yeah, thank
Zsuzsanna,
you. Thank you. So I think we, right in the beginning of the pandemic, well, the beginning of the lockdown in Europe, we were discussing this question, and it seemed that insurance companies actually suspended the project works while they were working out how they can perform their day-to-day activities. However, I think the insurance industry adapted really well. Actually, now even when we're looking at general insurance activities performed from working from home, it is all fine. So insurers are getting back to their project work. And I think based on discussions I've had with industry participants, it is a bit slower because it is slightly less expedient to have the conversations around the implementation while everyone is somewhere else. But they have picked up the pace and they're carrying on with their implementation preparation.
Okay, thank you. So another question from the participant. Basically, this is coming from one of the participants from insurance entity in Indonesia. In our country, the human resources who have the actuarial skills are very limited. How do you overcome this problem in the context of the implementing of the IFRS 17, which will be effective by 2023? Because we know that actuaries play a very significant role in implementation of the IFRS 17. Maybe Nick and Sandra,
yeah, sure.
can you? Yeah.
So this is absolutely the key question, and it's a question we spend a lot of time talking about within Prudential in Indonesia and with Hong Kong. I don't know if many of the people who are on the call are old enough to remember the millennium bug. So this was the last years of the last millennia. Lots of people in IT did very well. They were very well paid as people rushed to a deadline to implement IT changes that were needed to make sure IT systems could work to a given deadline. Now, some of those people were very scarce, and some of those people did very well financially out of the situation. Now, IFRS 17 is a much smaller issue. It doesn't have the same global scale, but for those of us who work in insurance, it's absolutely essential. It will have a timeline. There's probably a bit more flexibility in that timeline maybe than there was with the millennium bug. But some skill sets are out there, are very scarce, but they're absolutely essential to make this happen. Obviously, we've done what we can as an industry to improve the supply of actuaries in Indonesia, and we've done what we can to recruit and train accountants. But as I mentioned earlier, we also need good IT people, and those are also in scarce supply. So the key things here, I think, are in terms of getting started earlier so you have more time, looking at improving your existing processes so you can release people from BAU. And I have to say, we've had a couple of conversations with our regulator, the OJK, and they've been very accommodating in terms of, supporting us if we felt that we needed to go internationally and bring some people in on specialist or consultant contracts for the short term. So I think there's a number of options out there for participants in Indonesia, but I would recommend that people start thinking about it almost immediately if they haven't done so already.
Yes, I agree with Nick. We also facing exactly the same challenge, and we currently hiring more actuarial team members, as well as setting up new project-based sort of short-term consultancy-based resource peak for IFRS 17. And besides this, I think it's also that bringing people along the way much earlier. So within this IFRS 17, we have very experienced IT members who are appointed to be full-time allocated to this project, so that our accounting system, actuarial system, and all the trainings can be implemented, or can be provided to this small group of people that make learning while making changes and making discussion along the way. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So there is one good question here. So basically, Zsuzsanna already shared that in terms of the transition approach, by default, basically, insurance entities have to try the best to apply the full retrospective until it is considered impracticable to apply the fully retrospective, and then they can choose between the modified retrospective or the fair value approach. And then, Zsuzsanna, can you share the key consideration that for some of the insurance entities that choose the fair value approach?
Well,
what are the consideration of those entities that choose the fair value approach? Is there any experience of some of the insurance entities that already define that they will choose to apply the fair value approach for the transition?
Well, I think we are still at the stage when they're looking at data availability and to see how they can possibly, I think the issue is that the modified retrospective approach is not really that much of a help compared to the fully retrospective approach. So I think some insurers were hoping for more substantial amendments in this area, and this is what they were asking. But now, in light of what was actually put through, and of course it's dependent on the final standard, it is probably more likely that more insurers will choose the fair value approach. But I think that will also have to have its own considerations regarding data availability, coping with the volatility, and the necessary information and systems to do that as well.
Okay, thank you. So there is one question addressed to Nick. This is from one participant from life insurance entity in Indonesia. So basically, based on the discussion of the insurance industry in Indonesia, most of them ask for the pending of the effective date of IFRS 17 until 2025 in Indonesia. So, what is your response to this request?
So, as I said earlier, I'm always very keen to have flexibility in dates and deadlines. I would just ask if the stakeholders can think of it, if there's possible to have any provisions for early adoption of IFRS 17. So sometimes when accounting standards are released, it's possible to adopt the new standard a little bit earlier if your systems are ready to go. It would be great if Indonesia could do that, at least within a limited window, whilst at the same time providing more time for all the companies to get on board. It's quite onerous, as you can imagine, in any finance department having to run more sets of accounts than you absolutely have to. And also it increases the scope for errors. It requires a lot more tests and reconciliations to make sure that the two sets of numbers are lined up. So I'd support the extension, but just see if it was possible to move across earlier, if at all possible, and if the company was ready and wanted to.
Okay, thank you. So basically, this is a very interesting discussion and how we respond to the Q&A of the participants. But due to the time constraint, now our webinar has come to the end of the session. So basically, thank you all for the speakers, Zsuzsanna, Nick, and Sandra. And thank you all for the participants who participating in today's webinar. Now I would like to return this to Mr. Auki Pratama as a host to close this event.
Yes, thank you, Alex. Our appreciation also for our speaker and panelists, Ms. Zsuzsanna Schiff, Mr. Nick Holder, and last but not least, Ms. Sandra Zhao. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is certainly encouraging to see your positive responses and interest in learning more about IFRS 17. So we hope you find today's webinar useful. Now, if you're interested to learn more about particularly the impact of COVID-19 to the accountancy profession, I would like to invite you to visit the ICAEW-IAI-AFA website to access more updates and resources on the topic. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind you to go through our short survey in slido.com under polls if you have not done so, because your feedback is very much appreciated. So with that, on behalf of our hosts, ICAEW, IAI, and AFA, I would like to thank you for joining us in this second webinar of our webinar series for 2020. Now, my name is Auki Pratama. Please take care, stay safe, and see you at our next joint webinar. Terima kasih dan selamat sore.